You have no idea how hard it's been for me to wait to get to this slide and share this information with you. We've used the word service many times, and now we finally get to talk about it. IT organizations or service providers can create both products and services. ITIL defines a service as a means of enabling value co creation by facilitating the outcomes customers want to achieve without the customer having to own and manage the specific costs and risks. If there was a phrase in this course that was important to remember, this would be it. This is what the whole show is all about. Let's take this apart, shall we? First, we'll examine the part of the definition that discusses a service as a means of value co-creation. We've discussed the idea that value is really a two-way street. All parties or stakeholders should see benefit or value from the creation and delivery of a service. A customer finds the increased performance or the constraints that are removed by the service valuable. The service provider finds value from things like funding, demand, use of the service, feedback and input from customers and users. In this manner, value is co-created. Next, we look at the part of the definition that discusses facilitating outcomes that customers want to achieve. What do we mean by that? Let's say that I'm a customer. I have money to spend and I have an outcome that I want to achieve. We could pretend that next week's class is going to be at a training center in Washington, D.C. That's a problem for me because I live in Nashville, Tennessee. The class is supposed to start at 8 a.m. Monday morning. If I don't get to Washington, D.C. by 8 a.m., I won't be able to teach the class. And if I don't teach the class, I won't make any money for my company. If I don't make any money for my company, I'll go out of business. So the outcome I'm looking to achieve is to get from Nashville, Tennessee to Washington, D.C. by Monday morning, 8 a.m. As a customer, do I have a choice in how I achieve that outcome? Sure, I do. One choice would be for me to walk all the way to Washington, D.C. Now, walking is going to take a little time, well over 30 days if I don't do anything else, and that's just one way. Some people may think that walking is inexpensive and could be considered as an option. I will tell you that it's the most expensive option available. Why? Because although the act of walking is free, I still need to eat. I still need to sleep. And if I'm walking, I can't do much of anything else. So we're looking at 30 days of food plus 30 days of lodging just to get to the class. And when I'm done, I've got 30 days of travel to come back home. For 2 entire months of the year, I can't generate any revenue from my company other than the one class that I would teach in Washington, D.C. To make it worse, if there are any delays along the way, like an injury or bad weather, I may miss my class and lose the opportunity to generate revenue. You might say, well, Mike, you could use a little technology. What if you got a bike or a scooter? Sure, let's look at that. Let's say I bought a scooter for $500. I'm fine paying that because it would cut my time down from 30 days to about 15 days one way. During that time, I still need to eat, I still need to sleep, and I can't work while I'm riding my scooter. Because it still takes so long to travel, I'm sure that I'll spend more money getting to and from the class than I would make when I was at the class. If the scooter breaks down along the way, or there's a weather delay, I could miss out on the opportunity altogether. Even though riding a scooter is faster than walking, it's still a very costly and very risky way to travel. You may say, well, Mike, how about driving? Driving sounds like a good option. To drive, I'd have to buy a car. I would be responsible for the maintenance, the insurance, the fuel, the parking, and all of the other costs that go along with owning a vehicle. Depending upon the model of your car, you may get good or bad gas mileage. Let's say for this trip, I wanted to drive the Viper. The Viper is good for about 13 miles to the gallon. I could get to DC in about 11 hours, depending upon traffic and how often I wanted to stop. We'll say it would take about 1 full day there and 1 full day back. When you factor in the cost of the vehicle, fuel, insurance, maintenance, all that stuff, it's about $500 one way or $1,000 round trip for me to drive. The good news is, because this is faster than walking or riding a scooter, I could have taught a course last week, and I'll probably be able to teach a course the week after next. But it's still a very costly way to travel, and I still have to manage all the cost and risk. I have to pay for the fuel, I have to pay for the tires, any speeding tickets. If there's a breakdown, it's entirely on me to manage. Alternatively, I could subscribe to a service. An airline in Nashville says, "Mr. Link, if you show up at Nashville International Airport on Sunday afternoon, we'll get you and one of your bags safely to Ronald Reagan Airport for the low, low price of $199.95 round trip." My question to you, friends, is would this airline service be valuable to me? That's the first part. And if so, what specifically about that service makes it valuable? To answer the first part of the question, yes, it would be valuable to me. If I used the service and it successfully transported me in one bag to Washington, D.C. by Monday morning at 8 a.m., it would have facilitated the outcome I was trying to achieve. Now, to the second part, what about the service makes it valuable? The airline service would be valuable to me for many reasons. First, it will greatly reduce the amount of time I have to spend traveling. Second, it will reduce the cost associated with me getting to my course. $199.95 is a lot cheaper than $1,000 round trip or several $1,000s that I have to pay if I was walking or riding my scooter. The flight will also increase my performance. When I show up for the class, I'll be rested and I can put on a better show. It's a lot less intense on the body than walking or riding a scooter. I can also teach more classes during the same amount of time. If I chose another way to get to DC, like walking or riding a scooter, I couldn't teach as many classes. Good services, which are the only kind of services that we wish to sell, both increase performance and remove constraints for our customers. Services are all about outcomes. This is what your customers are paying for. They don't care about pieces and parts used to provide a service. The service game is an outcome game. I'm not paying an airline because I want to sit in an aluminum capsule with uncomfortable chairs and 180 of my closest friends breathing recirculated air, all while being bombarded with radiation for several hours. That doesn't do much for me at all. I'm paying for the ability to get from Nashville to DC a lot quicker than I could do it myself. As a customer, I'm okay with paying an airline for a seat on the plane and access to the service because it benefits me to do so. As a customer, I would find that service valuable. Now, the best part of this service is I don't have to walk, I don't have to ride a scooter, stay out in the cold, pay for tires, pay for speeding tickets or fight them in court, none of that. The last part of the definition of a service says without the customer having to own the specific cost and risks. What do we mean by that? The airline owns the specific cost and risks associated with the production of the airline service. They own the plane, its storage, its maintenance. They pay for the fuel. They file flight plans. They manage inspections. They clean the plane, all of that stuff. I don't have to do any of that. Personally, I don't want to own a plane as they're very expensive, and owning one wouldn't necessarily be a strategic advantage for my company. It wouldn't help me deliver more or better training. The great thing about the airline service is, as a consumer, I get the outcomes I want to achieve for a fraction of the price that I would normally have to pay if I tried to do it myself. Now, this is a non-IT example of a service. Let's give you more of an IT example. Let's look at email. Email is a service. It facilitates an outcome that customers want to achieve, which is to send and receive documentation. Can customers send and receive documentation without email? Sure they can. They've only been doing it for thousands of years. To understand the value of the email service, we need to understand some of the competing alternatives. First, there's the do-it-yourself model. If I had time, I could type up a message or write it by hand and deliver the message to the recipient myself. It sounds great if the person that I want to send the message to is across the room or maybe in the same building that I'm in, but if they're some distance away, that can be painful. Just think if they were in a different state or on the other side of the continent. You'd be out of the office for days just trying to deliver your message. You're going to be busy for some time. While you're delivering your message, you probably won't be able to do much else. So if you don't have that much time and that much money to spend on delivering a message yourself, and you're comfortable, you could always spend 50 cents and buy a stamp. You could drop your communication in a mailbox and have the United States Postal Service deliver your message for you. 3 days later, your message will show up, and if you have the correct address on the letter, the person will receive the message. Now, that's a pretty cheap way to send a single letter, but what if you have to communicate with a lot of people? The cost of communicating could add up to some significant money over time. Also, you still have to stop what you're doing and go to the post office to drop your letters and buy stamps. What if you needed to have the letter there a little faster than regular mail? You could pay for an expedited service from several different companies. They will have your letter delivered in less than 24 hours for about $10 to $12 a parcel. That'll save you time, but it significantly increases your cost to communicate. This is where email comes in. Email facilitates the outcome of communication and collaboration, as well as sending and receiving documentation. The email service is valuable because it removes a constraint of time by allowing somebody to communicate quickly with a person or group of people. Documents can be sent in a flash, and then users of this service can get on with their day and do other things besides getting in a car and driving to deliver a letter themselves, go to the post office, or arrange for a FedEx pickup. It also removes the constraint of cost. You don't have to pay for the fuel in your car if you were to try to deliver the letter yourself. You don't have to buy a stamp or spend $10 or more to send a letter through some expediter. You can just hit a button on your PC, and in a fraction of a second, the email is sent and hopefully received. The transaction itself cost a fraction of a cent. In this service, the customer gets the outcome they're trying to achieve, which is to send and receive communications without having to own the specific cost and risks of providing the service. They don't have to own a server, a network. They don't have to manage updates to software. They don't have to design, build, test, implement, or deliver and support a service when it breaks. They pay a low monthly fee to have access to the service and they get the outcomes they're trying to achieve. We have other examples of services for you that you can review at your leisure. We discuss examples of services for hospitals, retail organizations, banking, and cab companies. We even have examples for governmental organizations. Of course, these aren't the only kinds of services that are out there, and every organization can have multiple services that they support. I find that giving a buffet of examples helps cement the understanding of what a service is. This is one of the most critical topics in the course for you to embrace and is the basis for everything else we're going to talk about. We'll talk more about outcomes a little later in our discussion. For now, let's shift our focus to products. A product is a configuration of an organization's resources designed to offer value for a consumer. Every product that an organization offers is created with a customer or consumer in mind. Whether they're an existing customer or a potential customer that we're looking to attract, the configuration of an organization's products should meet their needs. When it comes to both products and services, it's important to know that customization isn't everything. A product may not be specific to the needs of a single consumer group. For example, a PC is a product. The PC that the IT organization provides to sales business unit would most likely work well in the marketing business unit, R&D, HR, or accounts payable. That doesn't mean that there wouldn't be special requirements that require specific computing resources. It's just meant to illustrate that some products can be one size fits all, or at least one size fits most. A service provider can create value through the sale of both products and services. If I'm in your seat, I would definitely want to know the terms and definitions for products and services. Just go ahead and bet that they're going to be on your foundation exam. Building or structuring products and services into service offerings allows a service provider to limit its offerings to their customers. Organizations create logical groupings and customer-focused descriptions of their products and service offerings to promote standardization and make it easier for service consumers to find information about the offerings that are currently available. Usually this is done through the creation and maintenance of a tool called a service catalog. Service catalogs can be paper-based, they can be digital, could be a website, or part of a ITSM tool suite. The format isn't as important as the information that's in it. For example, you might have a service catalog that contains dozens of products and services. You wouldn't want a customer or user to have to look at every single service before they find the one that they want. Ideally, you'd have it broken down into various sections or lines of service. You could have a section in the service catalog that deals with communication and collaboration services. You could have a desktop publishing and computing service. You could have a managed print service, management reporting services, medical imaging services, compliance and reporting services, so on and so forth. Within each section of the service catalog, there may be one or more service offerings. Service offerings are a way to package various combinations of service provider resources into ways that are meaningful and best aligned to their customers' needs. It's important to note that service offerings in our catalog may contain both products and services. Products are configurations of resources, people, information, technology, value streams, processes, suppliers, and partners. Basically, it can include all of the four dimensions that we've talked about. It's also important to note that products that IT offers may or may not be fully visible to the customer. For example, imagine that you want to buy a new cell phone from any of the cell providers here in the US. As you're shopping around, you want to find out what each service provider can offer and the corresponding price. To find that information quickly, you visit their website, which is in essence their service catalog. You can see the various products and services that they offer. When you're logged into their catalog, you can see pictures and descriptions of all the cell phones they offer, and you can see the latest and greatest gadgets with the new features and any special offers that are available. They put the phone selection first because it's the part of the service or product that's visible to the customer. Customers often have a preference of one kind of phone over the other. Some folks like Samsung, others like Apple, that kind of thing. Although the consumer can see and touch the cell phone, which is a product, many other components go into providing a cellular service. Those components are invisible to the consumer. The new line provisioning process, cell towers, connectivity between the cell towers, the people that do the maintenance on the infrastructure, software updates, configuration changes to the cell phone, all of these things have to be managed to provide the cellular service, and all of these would be invisible to the consumer. After you select your phone and its configuration, you must then select the service offering or cellular plan to go with your new phone. Cell providers may define various levels of service like a silver, a gold, and a platinum level cellular plan. Cellular providers usually maintain a limited number of options to make it easier for the service provider to manage the relationships with their customers. The various plans spell out the exact number of minutes, text messages, and data that are included for the price. They display the various plans and offerings in a way that makes it easy for consumers to decide which offering is the best value for their needs. The cellular company will configure the service offerings and plans based on their understanding of the markets they wish to serve. For example, if they have a silver plan or offering, it might have 500 minutes of talk in a month's time, 100 text messages, and 500 megabytes of data for $30 a month. This would be focused on users who don't need many of the frills or have to have the latest smartphones, which get used heavily and consume a lot of data. Other offerings for the cellular service may have significantly more minutes, all the way up to maybe an unlimited plan. The same could easily apply to text messages and wireless connectivity. Of course, the bigger the plan you get, the more you expect to pay and the more potential value it can bring to the customer. Standardization of service offerings can significantly improve the IT organization's ability to manage service relationships with their consumers. Consumer input is important for any kind of a shared service where standardized services are offered. Setting up service offerings without understanding what your customers want sounds like a bad practice to me. I would want to know that service offerings contain products and services which may or may not be visible to customers, and the act of creating service offerings promotes standardization. Know that for your exam. Let's go a little deeper into our discussion of service offerings. A service offering is a description of one or more services designed to address the needs of a target customer group. A service offering may contain a configuration of one or more of three things: goods, access to resources or services, and service actions. Examples of goods that are part of a service offering could include issuing somebody a cell phone, a laptop, a desktop, a printer, or a monitor. The idea here is that all of these things are tangible. Once the good is provided to the consumer, ownership of the good is transferred to the customer or the user, and they're responsible for its use. Think about when you buy a cell phone. Once you pay for it, it's yours. If you drop it in the tub or back over it with the car, it's going to be on you to replace. The next element of a service offering we'll talk about is access to resources. Access to resources is granted while a subscription to the service is active. A consumer can use the resources, but the customer or user doesn't own the resources. Examples of providing access to resources includes providing users access to an online medical library. A monthly fee is paid to a service provider to gain visibility to the information and knowledge in the medical library. The information in the library is frequently updated with the latest research and new standards of care. The user can have visibility to the latest medical information as long as the membership or subscription is active. The user doesn't contribute to the research, they don't make any updates to the information, and they don't own any of the resources like servers, websites, the network, databases, or people that make the service available. A second example of access to resources could be a company providing cellular service to a user. The user can make calls on the cellular network. However, they don't own the cell towers and the connectivity. Once they cancel their subscription or don't pay their bill, they can't make or receive a call. A third example would be a subscription to a video or music streaming service. If you pay your monthly fee, you can stream and download as much content as you like. If the subscription is canceled, you can't stream anything else, and any downloaded content is no longer playable. The last element of a service offering we'll discuss is service actions. The term service action may seem a little odd here. A service action refers to things the service provider could do or activities the service provider will perform according to an agreement with the customer. Some examples of service actions include a commitment from the service provider that password resets will be handled within 10 minutes of a reset request being made. Requests for providing user access to a service will be handled within a certain committed amount of time. Incidents to a particular service will have the service restored within X number of hours based on how the incident is prioritized. Requested reports will be available within 24 hours. Loan applications submitted will provide a notification to the requester of the status of approval or rejection within a specific time frame, so on and so forth. Service actions can either be support activities provided or performed by the service provider that underpin the delivery of a service, or outputs that a service provides that are used to facilitate an outcome. The information on this slide is incredibly important to know, friends. I would have the definition of a service offering down cold, and I would also want to know what the elements of a service offering are as I prepare for the test. Depending on the kind of organization a service provider is, service offerings may be made available to internal or external consumers. Service offerings are usually presented to consumers through a service catalog. It's not uncommon for there to be multiple offerings for the same service. This slide shows an example of how an email service may have different levels of utility and warranty offered at different prices. In each column on the slide, we show various service level packages. These service offerings are configured to better align to our customer needs. Some customers may need higher levels of storage or support, or they may even need a device to access email on. These different service offerings provide combinations of goods, access to resources, and service actions. There may be different prices that we extend to customers based on the level of service that's offered. When you're presenting information about service offerings, IT organizations should consider their customers' communication needs. Understanding these will help the IT organization develop effective methods to present information about the service offerings that are available in a service catalog to inform customer purchasing decisions. You may have noticed I have mentioned consumers purchasing a product or service a few times. I would note that not all IT organizations have a mandate to charge customers for the services they provide. Your organization's service catalog may not include prices for services offered to internal customers. However, this does not mean that services are not funded. For example, top management in a company may agree to provide funding for an email service that will be made available to everyone in the company so they can send and receive communications electronically. The service funding comes from top management, so there's no need to charge every business unit manager for access to the email service that's provided to the users in their department. The catalog would still need to show the different offerings to allow consumers to see what's available. The catalog can facilitate the ordering or requesting of access to the services that are offered. Hopefully, everyone should have a pretty good idea of what a service offering is by now. I would make sure that I knew this term for the test. Remember that service offerings can contain goods like a DVR, a set-top box, a computer, a laptop, a cell phone, a printer, etc. They can contain access to resources like access to the internet, the network, video on demand, a medical library, tools or templates, things of that nature. And finally, service offerings may include commitments around service actions. Things like cash is dispensed from an ATM, payments are received, exam papers are scored, passwords are reset, new accounts are created, and so on.